Welcome to Awesome Story Time. My name is David, and I'm so glad that you're joining us today. We're going to read 3 terrific books together, and I'm going to get right into it because the first one is one that we couldn't finish last week because we were having some technical problems. And so let's start all over from the beginning. This is a great book called Click, Clack, Moo, Cows That Type. Have you ever heard anything that crazy before? I know I haven't. Let's start. This is by Doreen Cronin with pictures by Betsy Lewin. Click, Clack, Moo, Cows That Type. Farmer Brown had a problem. His cows like to type. All day long he hears click, clack, moo, click, clack, moo, click, clack, moo. That would be a little unnerving. At first, he couldn't believe his ears. Cows that type? Impossible. Click, clack, moo, click, clack, moo, click, clack, moo. Then he couldn't believe his eyes. Look at this note, apparently left by the cows. Dear Farmer Brown, the barn is very cold at night. We'd like some electric blankets. Sincerely, the cows. It was bad enough the cows had found the old typewriter in the barn. Now they wanted electric blankets. No way, said Farmer Brown. No electric blankets. So the cows went on strike. They left a note on the barn door. Sorry, we're closed. No milk today. The next day, he got another note. Dear Farmer Brown, the hens are cold too. They like electric blankets. Sincerely, the cows. What would you do if you were Farmer Brown? Really? The cows were growing impatient with the farmer. They left a new note on the barn door. Closed. No milk. No eggs. No eggs, cried Farmer Brown. In the background he heard them click, clack, moo, click, clack, moo, click, clack, moo. Cows that type. Hens on strike. Who ever heard of such a thing? How can I run a farm with no milk and no eggs? Farmer Brown was furious. Farmer Brown got out his own typewriter. Dear cows and hens, there will be no electric blankets. You are cows and hens. I demand milk and eggs. Sincerely, Farmer Brown. Oh, the times I've had to write letters like that. Well, Duck. There's Duck. Duck was a neutral party. So he brought the ultimatum to the cows. Good old Duck. The cows, they held an emergency meeting. All the animals gathered around the barn to snoop, but none of them could understand moo. All night long, Farmer Brown waited for an answer. Duck knocked on the door early the next morning. He handed Farmer Brown a note. Dear Farmer Brown, we will exchange our typewriter for electric blankets. Leave them outside the barn door, and we will send Duck over with the typewriter. Sincerely, the cows. Farmer Brown decided this was a good deal. He left the blankets next to the barn door and waited for Duck to come with the typewriter. What do you think happened? The next morning, he got a note. Dear Farmer Brown, the pond is quite boring. We'd like a diving board. Sincerely, the ducks. Click, clack, quack. Click, clack, quack. Click, clack, quack. Woohoo! They got it. Isn't that a fantastic book? Oh, I love it. Hey, I want to give a shout out to some viewers today. I want to say hello to Tommy, who lives up in New York State. How you doing, Tommy? You're the man. Let's see. Who else is watching? Oh, Keegan. Hey, Keegan, down in Texas. So glad you're with us today. You're the dude. All right. This is a book. This is a little bit long, so you're going to have to stick with me on this. This is a great book. A wonderful book called Jumanji. Is written and illustrated by this terrific author named Chris Van Allburg. He has written some crazy good books. You know, the Polar Express, same dude. All right. I want to hold the pictures up especially so you can just see how fantastic they are. Ready? Sit back, get comfortable. Wait, I forgot something. Before I read Jumanji, I want to say a special thank you to the people at the Doylestown bookshop. They let me borrow this particular book, and I really appreciate that very much. You can go online and buy any of these books through the Doylestown and Lahaska bookshops. So please do that. They're awesome there. All right. Now, here we go. Ready? I apparently missed the first page. That could be an issue. Now remember, Mother said, your father and I are bringing some guests by after the opera, so please keep the house neat. Quite so, added Father, tucking his scarf inside his coat. Mother peered into the hall mirror and carefully pinned her hat in place, then knelt and kissed both children goodbye. When the front door closed, Judy and Peter giggled with delight. They took all their toys out of the toy chest and made a terrible mess, but their laughter slowly turned to silence till finally Peter slouched into a chair. You know what? He said. I'm really bored. Me too, sighed Judy. Why don't we go outside and play? Peter agreed, so they set off across the street to the park. It was cold for November. The children could see their breath like steam. They rolled in the leaves, and when Judy tried to stuff some leaves down Peter's sweater, he jumped up and ran behind a tree. When his sister caught up with him, he was kneeling at the foot of the tree looking at a long, thin box. What's that? Judy asked. It's a game, said Peter, handing her the box. Jumanji, Judy read from the box, a jungle adventure game. Look, said Peter, pointed to a note taped to the bottom of the box. In a childlike handwriting were the words, free game, fun for some but not for all. P.S. Read instructions carefully. You ever read instructions carefully? Want to take it home? Judy asked. Not really, said Peter. I'm sure somebody left it here because it's so boring. Oh, come on, protested Judy. Let's give it a try. Race you home. And off she ran with Peter at her heels. At home, the children spread the game out on a card table. It looked very much like the games they already had. There was a board that unfolded, revealing a path of colored squares. The squares had messages written on them. The path started in the deepest jungle and ended up in Jumanji, a city of golden buildings and towers. Peter began to shake the dice and play with the other pieces that were in the box. Put those down and listen, said Judy. I'm going to read the instructions. Jumanji, a young people's jungle adventure, especially designed for the bored and the restless. I think I remember that soap opera, The Bored and the Restless. Wait a minute. A. Player selects piece and places it in the deepest jungle. B. Player rolls dice and moves piece along path toward the dangers of the jungle. C. These are the instructions. First player to reach Jumanji and yell the city's name aloud is the winner. Is that all? Asked Peter, sounding disappointed. No, said Judy. There's one more thing, and this is in capital letters. That means real big letters. D. Very important. Once the game of Jumanji is started, it will not be over until one player reaches the Golden City. Oh, big deal, said Peter, who gave a bored yawn. Here, said Judy, handing her brother the dice. You go first. Peter casually dropped the dice from his hand. 7, said Judy. Peter moved his piece to the 7th square. Lion attacks. Move back 2 spaces, read Judy. Gosh, how exciting, said Peter in a very unexcited voice. As he reached for his piece, he looked up at his sister. She had a look of absolute horror on her face. Peter, she whispered, turn around very slowly. The boy turned in his chair. He couldn't believe his eyes. Lying on the piano was a lion, staring at Peter and licking his lips. The lion roared so loud it knocked Peter right off his chair. The big cat jumped to the floor. Peter was up on his feet, running through the house with the lion a whisker's length behind. He ran upstairs and dove under a bed. The lion tried to squeeze under, but got his head stuck. Peter scrambled out, ran from the bedroom, and slammed the door behind him. He stood in the hall with Judy, gasping for breath. I don't think, said Peter in between gasps of air, that I want to play this game anymore. But we have to, said Judy as she helped Peter back downstairs. I'm sure that's what the instructions mean. That lion won't go away until one of us wins the game. Peter stood next to the card table. Can't we just call the zoo and have them take him away? From upstairs came the sounds of growling and clawing at the bedroom door. Or maybe we could wait until Father comes home. Oh, sure, that'd be great. Thanks. Wait for Dad. No one would come from the zoo because they wouldn't believe us, said Judy. And you know how upset Mother would be if there was a lion in the bedroom. Well, that is true. We started this game, and now we have to finish it. Peter looked down at the game board. What if Judy rolled a 7? There'd be 2 lions. For an instant, Peter thought he was going to cry. Then he sat firmly in his chair and said, Let's play. Judy picked up the dice, rolled an 8, and moved her piece. Monkeys steal food, miss 1 turn, she read. From the kitchen came the sound of banging pots and falling jars. The children ran in to see a dozen monkeys tearing the room apart. Oh, boy, said Peter. This would upset Mother even more than the lion. Quick, said Judy, back to the game. Peter took his turn. Thank heavens he landed on a blank space. He rolled again. Monsoon season begins. Lose one turn. Monsoon. That is a lot of rain. Little raindrops began to fall in the living room. Then a roll of thunder shook the walls and scared the monkeys out of the kitchen. The rain began to fall in buckets as Judy took the dice. I mean, that's a lot of rain. Monsoons. Yeah, you know what? Guide gets lost, lose one turn. The rain suddenly stopped. The children turned to see a man hunched over a map. "Oh dear, I say, what a bad luck now," he mumbled. "Perhaps a left turn here, then no, a right turn here. Yes, absolutely, I think a right turn, or maybe..." "Excuse me," said Judy, but the guide just ignored her. "Around here, then over, no, over here, and around this, yes, good, but then, Judy shrugged her shoulders and handed the dice to Peter. Who was this dude? 4, 5, 6, he counted. Bitten by a tsetse fly, contract sleeping sickness, lose one turn. Judy heard a faint buzzing noise. Watched a small insect land on Peter's nose. Peter lifted his hand to brush the bug away, but then stopped, gave a tremendous yawn, and fell sound asleep, his head on the table. Peter, wake up," cried Judy, but it was of no use. She grabbed the dice and moved to a blank. She rolled again and waited in amazement. Rhinoceros stampede, go back 2 spaces. As fast as he had fallen asleep, Peter awoke. Together they listened to a rumble in the hallway. It grew louder and louder. Suddenly, a herd of rhinos charged through the living room and into the dining room, crushing all the furniture in their path. Peter and Judy covered their ears as sounds of splintering wood and breaking china filled the house. No, that happened to me once too. Not really. Peter gave the dice a quick tumble. Pythons, sneaks into camp, go back 1 space. Ugh. Judy shrieked and jumped up out her chair. "Over the fireplace," said Peter. Judy sat down again, nervously eyeing the 8-foot snake that was wrapping itself around the mantel clock. The guide looked up from his map, took one look at the snake, and moved to the far corner of the room, joining the monkeys on the couch. That's probably where I would be too. Just saying. Just not that brave. Judy took her turn and landed on the blank space. Her brother took the dice and rolled a 3. "Oh no," he moaned. Volcano erupts. Go back 3 spaces. The room became warm and started to shake a little. Molten lava poured from the fireplace opening. It hit the water on the floor, and the room filled with steam. Judy rolled the dice and moved ahead. Discover shortcut. Roll again. "Oh dear," cried Judy. Judy saw the snake unwrapping himself from the clock. "If you roll a 12, you can get out of the jungle," said Peter. Please, Judy begged as she shook the dice. The snake was wriggling his way to the floor. She dropped the dice from her hand. 1 6, then another. Judy grabbed a piece and slammed it to the board. "Jumanji," she yelled, as loud as she could. You're darn right she did. The steam in the room became thicker and thicker. Judy could not even see Peter across the table. Then, as if all the doors and windows had been opened, a cool breeze cleared the steam from the room. Everything was just as it had been before the game. No monkeys, no guide, no water, no broken furniture, no snake, no lion roaring upstairs, no rhinos. Without saying a word to each other, Peter and Judy threw the game into the box. They bolted out the door, ran across the street to the park, and dropped the game under a tree. Smart move. But both children were too excited to sit quietly, so Peter took out a picture puzzle. As they fit the pieces together, their excitement slowly turned to relief and then to exhaustion. With the puzzle half done, Peter and Judy fell sound asleep on the sofa. "Wake up, dears," Mother's voice called. Judy opened her eyes. Mother and Father had returned, and their guests were arriving. Judy gave Peter a nudge to wake him. Yawning and stretching, they got to their feet. Mother introduced them to some of the guests, then asked, "Did you have an exciting afternoon?" "Oh, yes," said Peter. "We had a flood, a stampede, a volcano. I got sleeping sickness," and Peter was interrupted by the adults' laughter. "Well," said Mother, "I think you both got sleeping sickness. Why don't you go upstairs and put your pajamas on? Then you can finish your puzzle and have some dinner." When Peter and Judy came back downstairs, they found that Father had moved the puzzle into the den. While the children were working on it, one of the guests, Mrs. Budwing, bought them a tray of food. "Such a hard puzzle," she said to the children. "Daniel and Walter are always starting puzzles and never finishing them." Daniel and Walter were Mrs. Budwig's sons, but of course they were. "They never read instructions either." "Oh, well," said Mrs. Budwing, turning to rejoin the guests. "I guess they'll learn." Both children answered, "I hope so." But they weren't looking at Mrs. Budwing. They were looking out the window. Two boys were running through the park. They were Danny and Walter Budwing, and Danny had a long, thin box under his arm. Those guys, they never read instructions. You know, I don't either. But I should. We should all read instructions. And one of the instructions I would like to make today is a special request. And that is, if you have a storybook, a picture book that you would like for me to read, could be next week even, you can do that by sending that request to me at my own email address, david@salemstrong.org. If you have a favorite picture book you'd like for me to read, please send that to me, david@salemstrong.org. Okay. We have time for one more story. Just one. You ready? This is a classic by Marcia Brown. She's written so many great books. Oh, the list is endless, practically. This one's called Stone Soup. Well, that was hard to say. This one is called Stone Soup, and it's based on an old folk tale. Let me see when this was published. Yeah, long time ago. Here we go. Without any further ado, Stone Soup. It's a great lesson in human psychology. 3 soldiers trudged down a road in a strange country. They were on their way home from the wars. Besides being tired, they were hungry. In fact, they had eaten nothing for 2 days. Indeed. "How I would like a good dinner tonight," said the first soldier. "And a bed to sleep in," said the second. "But all that's impossible," said the third. "We must march on." On they marched. Suddenly, ahead of them, they saw the lights of a village. "Maybe we'll find a bite to eat there," said the first. "And a loft to sleep in," said the second. "No harm in asking," said the third. Now the peasants of that place feared strangers. When they heard that 3 soldiers were coming down the road, they talked among themselves. Suspicious. "Here come 3 soldiers. Soldiers are always hungry, but we have little enough for ourselves." And they hurried to hide their food. They pushed sacks of barley under the hay in the lofts. They lowered buckets of milk down into the wells. They spread old quilts. There we go. They spread old quilts over the carrot bins. They hid their cabbages and potatoes under the beds. They hung their meat in the cellars. They hid all that they had to eat, and then they waited. They weren't going to feed those soldiers. No way. The soldiers stopped at the first house. Oh, the soldiers stopped first at the house of Paul and Francois. Good evening to you, they said. Could you spare a bit of food for 3 hungry soldiers? We have no food for ourselves for 3 days, said Paul. Francois made a sad face. It's been a poor harvest. The 3 soldiers went on to the house of Albert and Louise. Could you spare a bit of food? And have you some corner where we could sleep for the night? Oh, no, said Albert. We gave all we could spare to soldiers who came before you. Our beds are full, said Louise. These townspeople are not making a good impression on me right now. Just saying. Attitude of scarcity, that kind of thing. All right. At Vincent and Marie's, the answer was the same. It had been a poor harvest, and all the grain must be kept for seed. So it went all through the village. Not a peasant had any food to give away. They all had good reasons. One family had used the grain for feed. Another had an old sick father to care for. Sure. All had too many mouths to feed. Yeah, I'll bet. The villagers stood in the street and sighed. They looked as hungry as they could. They put on the old hungry face. The 3 soldiers talked together. Then the first soldier called out, "Good people." The peasants drew near. "We are 3 hungry soldiers in a strange land. We've asked you for food, and you have no food. Well then, we will have to make stone soup." The peasants stared. Stone soup? That would be something to know about. The soldiers continued. "First, we'll need a large iron pot," the soldiers said. The peasants brought the largest pot they could find. How else to cook enough? "That's none too large," said the soldiers, "but it will do. And now, water to fill it and a fire to heat it." It took many buckets of water to fill the pot. A fire was built on the village square, and the pot was set to boil. "And now, if you please, 3 round, smooth stones." Those were easy enough to find. The peasants' eyes grew round as they watched the soldiers drop the stones into the pot. Stone soup. That would taste kind of stony. "Well, any soup needs salt and pepper," said the soldiers as they began to stir. Children ran to fetch salt and pepper. "Stones like these generally make good soup, but oh, if there were carrots, it would be much better." "Why, I think I have a carrot or 2, said Francois, and off she ran. She came back with her apron full of carrots from the bin beneath the red quilt, where she had so sneakily hidden them before. "A good stone soup would have cabbage," said the soldiers as they sliced the carrots into the pot, "but no use asking for what you don't have." "I think I could find a cabbage somewhere," said Marie, and she hurried home. Back she came with 3 cabbages from the cupboard under the bed. She just so happened to know, did she? we only had a bit of beef and a few potatoes, this soup would be good enough for a rich man's table. The peasants thought that over. They remembered their potatoes and sides of beef hanging in the cellars. They ran to fetch them. A rich man's soup, and all that from a few stones. It seemed like magic. These peasants. Ah, sighed the soldiers as they stirred in the beef and potatoes. If we only had a little barley and a cup of milk, this soup would be fit for the king himself. Indeed, he asked for just such a soup when last he dined with us. The peasants looked at each other. The soldiers had entertained the king? Oh, well. But no use asking for what you don't have, the soldiers sighed. The peasants brought their barley from the lofts. They brought their milk from the wells. The soldiers stirred the barley and milk into the steaming broth while the peasants stared. At last, the soup was ready. All of you shall taste, the soldiers said, but first a table must be set. Great tables were placed on the square, and all around were lighted torches. Sounds like a feast is coming up. Such a soup! How good it smelled! Truly fit for a king. But then the peasants asked themselves, would not such a soup require bread and a roast and cider? Cider. Soon a banquet was spread, and everyone sat down to eat. Never had there been such a feast. Never had the peasants tasted such soup, and fancy, made from stones. They ate and drank, and after that, they danced. They danced and sang far into the night. Because they were eating the stone soup and drinking that cider. Oh, yeah. At last, they were tired. Then the three soldiers asked, is there not a loft where we could sleep? Let three such wise and splendid gentlemen sleep in a loft? Indeed, they must have the best beds in the village. So, the first soldier slept in the priest's house. The second soldier slept in the baker's house. And the third soldier slept in the mayor's house. 3 important houses. Probably soft beds, too. Don't you imagine? In the morning, the whole village gathered in the square to give them a big send-off. Many thanks for what you have taught us, the peasant said to the soldiers. We shall never go hungry, now that we know how to make soup from stones. Oh, it's all in knowing how, said the soldiers, and off they went down the road. The peasants say, such men, they don't grow on every bush. Meaning, pretty smart. You know why I like this book so much? Why it's such a wonderful book? Because it's about the truth that we can all share. Keeping things to ourselves, not sharing, not such a good idea. So sharing makes everyone be able to eat at the table. So I guess that's the moral to that story. But it's just a great story. It's so much fun. Okay. Thanks so much for your time today. I think that wraps it up for us. Remember again, if you would like for me to read a storybook that is one of your very, very, very favorites, send me an email. I'll find the book. We'll read it, maybe even next time. So until next time, thanks so much for your time. And I'm David. This is Awesome Story Time. We'll be back next Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll see you then.